The Trey Lance dynamic. Go ahead. Define that for me if you would.
That's a tough one. I mean, the Trey Lance dynamic is everybody holding their breath at this point, waiting for it to be bad enough to where Kyle Shanahan is going to make the switch to Jimmy Garoppolo. I mean, I think there's a lot of people that believe he can be pretty good and the ceiling is pretty high and that this team can win a Super Bowl even with him or get close to it. I think others are just thinking he's blatantly not ready and not as good as Jimmy Garoppolo right now, and that if he's not, the onus is on the Niners to make the move back to the guy that they know for sure can get you at least into the NFC Championship game, if not beyond.
I mean, he's the quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers. Just that right there. He's the quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers. That makes him a massive, massive celebrity. But I guess what sort of pops around in my head when I talk about the Trey Lance dynamic is, man, this gets emotion all turned up really, really fast. And that is, can we all acknowledge, highly, highly abnormal for someone who has played 3.5 NFL football games. Now, some of that is circumstance, the fact that he was drafted early to a good team. Some of that the 49ers signed up for, the soap opera aforementioned. But then some of that is something that I can't quite put a finger on, which is there's something about Trey himself and who Jimmy was versus who Trey's supposed to be. And I mentioned this maybe a week and a half ago or so, and I wonder what you think about it. I would already say that Trey has achieved something, and I don't think he had anything to do with it, but something has been achieved around Trey Lance that's never happened in the history of the league and maybe in the history of sports. I have never seen takes like this about a person that range from he is going to be the MVP of the league to what Mike Martz said yesterday, which is he's dirt. He's dirt. He is dust. He was sarcastic. We'll play the audio for you in a little bit. He was sarcastic. He was rude. He essentially said there's nothing he does well. Other than that, he's a good player. I mean, can you think of another player where this was the range that people used to talk about him or her?
No. I mean, frankly, I can't. And I think the other part of the dynamic is just how much the 49ers spent to get him. A couple of extra first-round picks, the swap to move up to number 3. It's a franchise that has a couple of Hall of Fame quarterbacks that have won Super Bowls in their history. So I think that all adds to the dynamic of what it's supposed to look like. I think he's also held to the standard of the other young quarterbacks of this era that have had some success and had success relatively quickly, whether it's Pat Mahomes or now Josh Allen. I think in some way, Mark, why some are so quick to judge is because right now, and maybe he shouldn't look like that, one of those guys, but I think some people are thinking, well, wait a minute, where's this Josh Allen sauce? Where's this Pat Mahomes sauce? We're not seeing any of that. Therefore, you're more likely to go down the road of it looking like a failure, even though it's way too soon.
Well, Josh Allen's sauce, by the way, came in year 3. Go look it up. And Josh started playing right away. Josh played from, I don't remember if it was week 1, 2, or 3, but whatever. When he was a rookie, he played a whole lot. The word on him was, wow, athletic, small school, but inaccurate. Sound familiar? And then he went out there and you're like, wow, I can't believe they made this guy the 7th overall pick. And then in year 2, you're like, all right, a little better. And I see the athleticism. That's nice. Year 3, everyone went, holy hell, get him on my fantasy team right now. This guy's going to run the league. Is that going to happen with Trey? Could it happen with Trey? I have no idea. But you said something about the 1-2 punch of Mike Martz, former Rams coach, obviously former coordinator with the 49ers. You said something real interesting, and I want to reboot and get into that a little bit. For those of you who did not hear, and why I call it a 1-2 punch is he was on with Bonte and Joe just a few weeks ago, and at that time, this is preseason now, at that time, this was what Mike Martz said about Trey Lance.
Well, he's been there now long enough to be ready. I promise you that. He's been with them now, so he knows the offense. If he's not ready now, he'll never be ready. I don't care how raw he was. It's who he is and how well he competes and assimilates the offense and those kinds of things. I think he's, obviously, I'm not there. I've never seen him practice, but I would trust the fact that they made that move, that there's a great belief in his ability and where he'll be, and he'll coach him like that. And I think when you get a guy coaching like that believes in you, regardless, it just energizes you. It just gives you great confidence. And I think they have a great relationship.
Okay, so by the way, my bad. That was with Damon and Ratto, not with Bonte and Joe. That was on August 26th. Now, I do want to spotlight one thing where I actually fully agree with him, but also just spotlight the tone. He sounded real positive, right? Like, hey, if you've got Kyle Shanahan's belief and Kyle Shanahan's coaching, then this is going to go really well. The other thing that popped out there that I like is we got to stop calling this guy a rookie. He said it's year 2. If he's not ready now, he's never going to be ready. That's something I think we need to bring into our conversation about Trey Lance. This is not a rookie. This is someone who has been working around people who have been successful at the position for a year and a half now. He's been coached up on the field, off the field, in practice, 2 off seasons, all of that with Kyle Shanahan. He needs to be ready. That doesn't mean he needs to be a finished product. But this idea that, oh, gosh, he's just this little flower who hasn't bloomed yet, we got to stop that. This guy is not a rookie. So with that, JD, I agree to this point of what we've heard from Mike Martz.
Yes. The issue, though, is I think it's easier, and one of the things that I've thought as we kind of went through the summer, it's easier to project in a positive light without having seen him play a whole heck of a lot, because you're more reliant and dependent on what you hear or trusting, as Mike Martz did, the fact that, well, Shanahan's pretty sharp and their organization's pretty sharp, so I believe in that if they took him, they know what the heck they're doing. But then you actually see him play, and I think that creates, and I know we're going to play the other piece of sound from yesterday now, I think that creates a little different dynamic once we all actually get a chance to see him play.
Right, so that to me is a great point. Your take is when you heard Mike there, that meant, well, Mike just hadn't seen him play. Well, if that's the case, then now listen to this fresh comment from Mike Martz and realize that maybe this opinion really arrived simply because of one game that also happened to be in a monsoon. Let's hear that.
I've never seen anything about this kid that was encouraging at all. He really has to plan himself to make a good throw. He's not a quick decision guy. Everybody's shot in the rear about him being a mobile guy making plays with his feet. He looked like a fullback stumbling around trying to run the ball to me. I mean, he's not Lamar, so I don't know what he is. He's not particularly a good guy running with the football. And based on what I saw today, I mean, he missed 2 guys completely by themselves. I know it was in the rain, but quarterbacks do that. You make those throws. I know this, he can only go up. He can only get better because you can't get any worse than what he did today. I've never liked him. I still don't like him. I'd like to know what he does so well, because he's not a great passer, doesn't have good skills, takes him a long time to set himself and throw the football, misses easy throws, and he's not particularly a good runner. Other than that, he's a hell of a player.
Okay, other than that, he's a hell of a player. JD, that was 19 days. 19 days from what he said to Damon and Ratto to what he said yesterday, which was, and by the way, if you thought that was bad, you should have heard what he said about Justin Fields right before that. If you want to listen to Mike Martz, that game last weekend that we just watched was the matchup of the 2 worst quarterbacks in the history of the NFL. That's what it sounded like. Yeah,
a little over the top there. And then to say that he never liked him, I mean, that's the part where you almost just throw, it's like, what are we doing? Never liked him. You liked him 19 days ago. I mean, that's the part that I throw out as like, I mean, either he's misremembering or he's getting a couple of guys twisted. So that part I just don't get. The 2 parts that I did want to hone in on, because I think when you look at, okay, a guy that's been an offensive guru in the National Football League in his day, now he hasn't had a job since, 2011, when he watches him play and says, hey, the mobility that I've heard so much about looked a little different than I expected it to, looked more like a fullback stumbling around out there, and then the issue with needing the longer windup or to set himself and really get in position to make the throws, and then he still missed a couple of throws. I think those two things are fair, not even criticisms, but fair observations to dissect maybe a little bit further.
It's not that his observations aren't fair. Let's not suddenly act like Mike Martz doesn't know football. But I guess this would be my challenge to Mike Martz, because I already told you the part that he said in either of these comments that I agree with, which is Trey does need to be ready. We got to stop calling him a rookie. He's been around long enough. I don't care what school he came from. I don't care his age. I don't care how many games he missed because of COVID. It is time for Trey Lance to be ready to play NFL football. On that, he's right. But the second part is inherently flawed. Every coach, no matter who, makes mistakes in the draft. Why? Well, I would say because when they are doing things like the combine, and you can hear it even with what Martz said, well, he takes too long to throw the ball, and his motion is this, and his feet are that. That's what they're looking at. They're looking at little X's and O's markers of like the process the player goes through. Yet, haven't we watched in professional sports that players blow that up all the time? You can come in and someone say, oh, Tom Brady, he's not fleet of foot. This is not going to work in the NFL. Oh, sorry, he's the GOAT. So to simply say, I don't like Trey's motion, that means he's bad. Have you ever watched Jim Furyk play golf? I bet he had a golf coach when he was in high school that went, that's the ugliest swing I've ever seen in my life. How the hell are you going to succeed? And then he won a major. So, like, those little things can be disproven by professional athletes. I am not worried about Trey Lance's throwing motion. I'm worried about whether or not he has the ability to make that work. I believe he can. That story still needs to be written, but that felt like a bunch of stuff. You cannot write off a career based on what Martz said, in my opinion.
No, you definitely can't, and I think the other part of it is, I mean, the Niners have worked with him on his motion. The Niners have worked on changing some of the mechanics. So I think that part makes it a little bit more like you could have 10 different coaches look at Trey Lance and you would probably get a couple of different answers of, well, I don't like this. He should probably do A. Somebody else might say he should do B. Like, depending upon where he was drafted. The one thing that I do think is true, and the Niners are a testament to this, there was something they didn't like or felt needed to be corrected because he spent the better part of his time in the NFL working on that. It was written about the fact that he got to a point where he liked where he was at with it, then got hurt last year, and that messed up some of what he worked on, had to relearn it essentially this offseason. So, yeah, writing the guy's career off is moronic at this point, but noting that it doesn't exactly look the way that you'd want it to look if you were somebody evaluating him, I think that's fair, to be perfectly honest. Go ahead. What did you make of the other part, too? I want to get into that.
Well, no, I just, to me, it sounded like Mike Martz was auditioning to get on ESPN. That like, honestly, that's what it, right? I mean, he sounded like, I can have my opinion, but I'm gonna deliver this in a hot take sort of a fashion. Like, oh, he can't do this and he can't do that. He can't do this over here. But other than that, it's a fantastic player. Oh, rim shot, snap, cool. You're super sarcastic and funny. Like, what professional coach talks about young players that way? This stuff goes backwards all the time. I remember what we said about Justin Herbert coming out of college. I remember what people said when the Chargers drafted him. And now look at him. So here's what is, I guess, if you want to have a concern about Trey Lance, to me, here it is. Even the Josh Allens who took 2 years, even Patrick Mahomes who got to sit for a full year, Justin Herbert got pressed into duty because of a weird situation with Tyrod Taylor like week 3, week 4 as a rookie. It doesn't always work right away. Allen wasn't a winning quarterback until year 3. Mahomes obviously came out year 2 and had a very memorable season. Justin Herbert, we all gush over him. He's never been to the playoffs. But what I want from Trey this year, is the same thing that fans of those three players got, which was flashes. You could see it. It's not always going to work. It's not always going to be a win. There are going to be bad decisions and interceptions. But there were also things with those guys when they walked on a field right away, you could see that factor. You're like, oh my gosh, this guy's got a little something different in the talent bucket that a lot of players don't have. I thought there were some throws in the first half against the Bears where it felt that way. And then the game flow and the weather and all of that sort of took over. But that's what I want out of Trey Lance. He doesn't need to win every game. He doesn't need to make every good decision. But when it's good, it needs to pop. I want this to pop off of your television screen this weekend so you can see the talent that he needs to grow into.
Flashes are fine, Mark, but flashes have to be coinciding with winning. And that's where this thing's already off the rails a little bit, because I'm with you. He did have flashes. He did have a couple of really nice completions, one to Jennings, one to Ayuk, one to Ray McLeod. I mean, three of them, 44, 31, 20 yards on display. I mean, you run quarterback power on 3rd and 13 and you pick up a first down. I think that goes down as a flash. They get down 13-10. The crowd's into it. You're there at Soldier Field, as am I, and he hits a 3rd and 5 completion. Now, the next time he had to hit a 3rd and 5 completion, he threw a bad interception, and that wound up steering the game, toward an L for the 49ers. But the flashes are great. But if you're flashing and losing, that's where the expectations for this 49ers team are different than the Bills a couple of years ago or some of these other teams. The Chargers when Herbert takes over in week 2, and by the way, is pretty awesome for a guy that wasn't expected to play for a while. That's where I think this thing gets skewed a little bit. And now they lost to the Bears. They lost to the freaking Bears, which only adds the pressure to this week and the coming weeks.
You're going to go to the phones in just a second, but do you remember the show we did last week?
Yep.
Where I was like, okay, tell me Monday what the show sounds like. And if it had been a loss, I mean, we thought we were going to do the show upside down. I'm going to stand on my head and do this show because it's going to be so sideways, so bananas. Now, there was context, and I think a lot of people got that. But you're not wrong. You're not wrong. This is the difficulty of taking over a winning team as a 22-year-old player.